Some organizations tend to believe that if they separate the functions and the modules, they are in effect mitigating the risk of being wedded to one system.
Is the business benefit from getting that deeper, richer functionality from a best-of-breed system, does that outweigh the cost of integrating that best-of-breed system back
and managing it yourself and all that kind of stuff? Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. We've got a really interesting topic today, and I've got someone I respect very much, Paul Klein, here to help me answer some of those questions. Topic today is integrated ERP, best of breed, and what's really changed in that space, and what are some of the considerations for strategy when it relates to that topic. So we really hope you enjoy today's chat, and yeah, let's get straight into it, Paul. So I'd like to start with just generally talking about integrated ERP and best of breed and how that's sort of come about and some of the misconceptions and general thoughts on that we have.
So my definition of native integrated ERP is what's provided as part of the core product by a single ERP vendor, and they have pre-built integration between processes to basically allow transactions to benefit from that without the client or the customer having to develop that integration as part of an implementation project. So a good example of that would be core financial functions, general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, being integrated to procurement processes. So as items are purchased, the financial recording of those transactions takes place automatically, and you're not having to integrate or link between those processes and do extra work around that. Yeah. It's automated for you. Now, in certain industries, the degree of integration depends on the industry. In certain industries, other functions are also pre-built into that integration as well. For example, in asset-intensive industries, we typically see maintenance and work management and also project management integrated into that same flow for the same reasons.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a really good point. Like in the manufacturing industry, you typically, and that's where ERP sort of really came from, the MRP space. The manufacturing industry, you have the manufacturing or work order engine deeply connected to your finance and to your inventory and warehousing because it's an integral part of the process, right? So it makes sense that you don't disintegrate that and separate it out. Let's talk about best of breed then. A couple of really clear examples, right, are HR, payroll, and let's call it customer relationship management. So those are typically, you see them as best of breed and they connect. Some vendors tend to integrate them. What others can you think of that are generally considered best of breed?
Before I answer the question, let me first give you my definition of what we really mean by best of breed. And best of breed to me is for a single process or function, selecting a system that provides specialist functionality in that domain.
Advanced functionality.
And the reason that an organisation might choose that is because they believe it's going to give them better fit to their requirements, ultimately better business benefits than taking a more generic offering from a fully integrated suite. So that's why best of breed solutions exist. What other examples do we see other than those ones you mentioned? I'll use the asset-intensive industries again as an example. What we typically see is health, safety and environment management is a very, very important requirement for those businesses, is typically requires a specialist system. You can get capability from the standard ERP offerings, but most of the larger organisations in those industries will choose a specialist best of breed system to support those processes.
That's a really good point. I think field service management as well falls in that space. Lately, it's become a real focus where field service has become a particular focus for best of breed, some of best of breed vendors, where they're trying to incorporate the FSM into the ERP. So that way you don't have to take your asset module out of the ERP. You can just add and value add the FSM. I guess you made a really good point. The specialist nature of the best of breed allows that particular organization that's developing it the old adage of, if I focus on one thing, I can do that perfectly, right? And so I guess then it becomes a question of, is the value add of that focus really that much more than just getting core functionality inside an already integrated ERP? And I guess that's the million-dollar question.
And
right?
This is the trade-off, and this is a very common question that comes up when we help our clients. Is the business benefit from getting that deeper, richer functionality from a best-of-breed system, does that outweigh the cost of integrating that best-of-breed system back
and
to
managing it yourself and all that kind of stuff?
Back to the core. Now, what we hear often in more recent years is that integration technologies have improved. The standard solutions from most of the leading vendors are much more open to integration with
which is all true, by the way.
And which is good, but it doesn't change the fact that there is still effort required when you first implement the product.
That's right.
And then probably more importantly, supporting and maintaining that integration as each of the systems have their own upgrade paths over time. That integration then needs to be maintained as each of the systems moved. So there is a cost to that. Now, in many cases, we see that it is worth that cost because the business benefit of the best-of-breed functionality is worth having. But in other cases, if all you're doing is really just building your own version of what has been pre-built thousands of times before or used thousands of times before by many other organisations, why would you do it? Why would you incur that cost and effort if you're not really getting any incremental benefit?
I do want to talk about this concept in recent years, this phenomenon where people are talking about, the likes of composable ERP. And I do want to touch back on that. But I think one of the main reasons, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I think one of the main reasons is because there's been a history of suboptimal implementations of ERP. And because there's quite a high level of failure in this space, right? When clients get integrated ERP, some organizations tend to believe that if they separate the functions and the modules, they are in effect mitigating the risk of being wedded to one system. And therefore, if they have to change out a particular component of a system, they could more easily do so. But I think it's a little bit of a dangerous path to take, right? Because so I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I've heard that, some of the work that we've done, I think we've heard that feedback, So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's worth reflecting on the history of how this has evolved over the years. In that when the concept of ERP first came to the fore, and organisations like SAP and Oracle, two of the leading ERP vendors globally, really came to their prominence. The focus then was on a fully integrated suite covering all modules, that the footprint was getting bigger and wider. Yeah. And as you said, organisations in some cases attempting to implement that full footprint across the full scope of their businesses often face challenges with, well, it wasn't always necessarily a perfect fit for every business function or every business unit that they're implementing it for. And often those implementation challenges then cause people to question that integrated strategy next time they looked at it.
It caused a negative sentiment to an extent.
So what we then saw was what was referred to by some in the industry as postmodern ERP, which was, if you like, shrinking down the core of those processes that are most integrated, the ones I was talking about before, your finance and procurement, keeping those as part of the core, but then maybe having around the outside a number of those best-of-breed applications like the health and safety. The other one I didn't mention before, but we often see budgeting and planning and forecasting is often a specialist application that rather than getting it from the standard ERP offering. Yeah, that's right. So in the postmodern ERP world, we saw an integrated core with best-of-breed solutions around the outside. The concept of a composable ERP is actually unraveling that even further and saying, well, let's break up all those functions and let's get a specialist finance application, a specialist procurement application, a specialist asset management application, and then use the latest integration technology to put them all together. That is possible to do. Yeah. It is easier to do and cheaper to do than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There is still a cost, as I was saying earlier, of developing and maintaining those integrations. There is also a factor here about the maturity of the business and the overall business strategy of the business as to when that might be appropriate. A startup or fast-moving, fast-growing business that's very quickly getting into new products and new markets and developing new capabilities and wants to be very flexible and very agile, it may well be that composable approach is the most valid.
And to a certain extent, they're kind of set up for it. They're already expecting unpredictability with it. They're expecting challenges, and they want to keep it flexible in terms of what it eventually becomes, because that's the nature of startups, right?
So there's absolutely a place for it in that domain. But our view and our experience is generally that for an established, mature business with fairly standard back office processes and systems and multiple business units, and with an intent to standardise and automate where possible across those processes, which is a common business goal, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to break all those things up. Because as I said before, if you're spending time and effort and money developing integrations and supporting integrations that could be pre-built for you, why would you bother?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I often, I've encountered composable ERP as a term, and it's almost become a buzzword when we're talking strategy, in terms of strategic options. Should we be taking more of a composable ERP strategy? And I think it's, as is often the case, including postmodern ERP, it's just a buzzword that someone developed and then put into the vernacular, and people are just focusing on it. But really, what I've found is that you really need to be prepared for it. And what I often say to organizations, and I know you've heard me say this before, I ask an organization, what is the core of your business? Are you a technology development organization? Or do you work in the industry where your core revenue comes from and where you support the client? And the organizations we deal with, yes, we've worked with some technology companies, but the majority of them are operational businesses, or businesses that deliver value that isn't technology development to their clients. Therefore, if you want to be a technology developer, then by all means, you can take a composable ERP and develop something that you can go and commercialize and bring out to the market. But taking on development of technology internally is a big undertaking, and you need to have a lot of foundational aspects. Usually it involves a large information technology team. Usually it involves very progressive leadership. It involves maturity in your processes and technologies, and it involves very close and even deeper relationships with a lot of the partners, right? I don't know if what you think about all of that, but that's very difficult to execute.
To me, it comes back to the overall business strategy and the growth ambitions, and that drives those choices. So there may be a particular process or a particular bit of IP that an organisation has that is a source of competitive advantage, and if wrapping that up in something that's been developed in-house or getting a specialist application that's dedicated to using that, then that may justify these kind of approaches. As I said before, if what you're talking about is not a source of competitive advantage and is not core business, if it's a support process that many others use and have similar needs, similar functional needs, then really that's best provided by a vendor and a suite that's been built for that. It would be much harder to justify the cost of that in-house support. The other thing that comes with, if you make a choice to have that in-house development and support team, the recruitment and attraction and retention of that skill set is very different from recruiting and attracting and retaining people in the core business. Many of those skills are in high demand and short supply in this country and globally. So there's a whole new set of challenges with going down that path, rather than accepting a more generic capability that's been developed for you.
I agree with all of that. If you take something that's been done tens of thousands of times successfully and is already working, moreover, if it's not part of the competitive advantage that you deliver, taking the risk of decomposing that and trying to create it yourself and integrate it is a risky strategy, right? However, having said that, just to kind of play devil's advocate, it is much more possible these days to do such a thing than it used to be because of APIs, because of integration mechanisms, which make it a lot easier for these systems to be connected. But when we say a lot easier, they are still very, very challenging and difficult to execute and manage and administer going forward. It's just that it's easier than it was before, where it was virtually impossible. Okay.
I agree. It is easier, it is cheaper than it was before, but just because it can be done doesn't mean it should be done. We've talked about some of the factors that drive these choices. We talked about industry-specific functionality and requirements. We've talked about overall business strategy and growth ambitions. The other thing that often drives these choices is the operational business model of an organisation in terms of how centralised or decentralised its processes and decision-making structures are. So if you take the extreme ends of that spectrum, if an organization has a goal to be highly centralized, highly standardized, all processes done the same way, regardless of location, business unit, and that is very much set from the top, from the center, then it makes sense to have a highly integrated single ERP solution and potentially that wider footprint that we talked about before to help drive that standardization. However, if the business model is the opposite of that, it is decentralized local autonomy in business units or functions, there is not a desire to have standardized processes. The goal is agility and flexibility and more rapid growth and change. Well, it may make sense then to have a much smaller, much thinner core in the middle and to have more best-of-breed functionality serving the needs of those individual functions or business units. So we always say with our clients, it's the business strategy and the operating model that comes first, and then the technology decision should drive that. And where we see sometimes organizations make the mistake of trying to make these technology choices without being really clear about those overall business goals.
And I think that brings up a really good point about the strategy when it relates to developing a strategy for your technology and a roadmap for your technology going forward, is that all the factors that we've been talking about that impact this, there is no such thing as a cookie cutter strategy or a cookie cutter roadmap, because it is so dependent on fundamental things about the organization, about maturity, about the operating model, about their setup and foundational aspects of that. And so it could be that you're in exactly the same industry. It could be that you're mostly do the same types of services and deliver value the same way to your customers. But your particular rating in one of those key factors may determine whether you need to take more of a best of breed in some aspects, more of a integrated in other aspects, and how you need to connect that. And it also, I guess, part of the strategy is what kind of partners we're talking about the technology now, but that's only half of the equation. The other half is which partners do we need to partner with to be able to execute this strategy, right? Because not every partner is comfortable with, and not every vendor is comfortable with managing the integration between best of breed and their ERP or an ERP. So a strategy has to be very tailored to where you are as an organization right now and where you think you're going to be in the 3 to 5 years. I know we do a lot of strategic work at SMC, and that's what we're finding, right? That there isn't a cookie cutter, and you can't just, it's not a black and white answer or a binary answer of composable ERP or this. It's typically a hybrid model of some sort, and you've got to kind of make concessions and decisions that go against the grain sometimes.
And when you talk about that, choosing the right partners, whether it be the vendor of the core product or the core platform on which the product is developed, or the partners that then help implement and support. One factor to take into account is the capability of those partners to support the organisation over a long-term period.
That's right.
And one thing that we do see, and we have seen this quite often, is people may select a best-of-breed solution that is developed by a smaller, more niche player, very focused on addressing a very specific need. On face value at the time of decision, that might be the best functional fit. But does that organisation have the capability to develop and support that product over time? And often smaller vendors get into trouble with that, oversell and overstretch themselves, and then struggle to support the clients they've initially sold and implemented for. And so that is another factor to take into account in these decisions is whether it's an integrated or a best-of-breed solution, is does the vendor organisation and its partners have the capability to support you in the long term, because it is a long-term decision. It's not just a decision for what's the best functional fit.
That's right. We typically say it's a 10, 15, 20-year vision, right? One last topic I'd like to cover with you is the concept of platforms, right? We've been talking about integrated ERP and best-of-breed functionality and modules and being separated and integrating them. I think a really important term that's become part of the vernacular now is about a platform, creating a platform. So a couple of examples of that are, Microsoft, SAP's, and Oracle's approach to creating a platform, a holistic suite of tools that essentially give you one system. And you have, with the likes of, for example, with the likes of Microsoft, they have, the message related to integration to Office 365. But within the others, there's been a lot of merger and acquisition of different tool sets to create more of an ecosystem, I guess you would call it, or a platform type solution. And I know we find that a lot in some of the recommendations, and it goes deep into how you develop your strategy. So what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely the platform concept and the ecosystem concept is a growing trend. There are certainly significant benefits to going down that path. And what we typically see in that, if you use the example of Microsoft, there are examples of products that Microsoft has developed themselves from scratch as part of their core product that are part of that ecosystem. There are also products that have been developed by other organizations that Microsoft has either acquired or partnered with, and then pre-built integration into the core product. And then there are development tools that allow, well, if neither of those first two give you the capability that you really need, you can develop on the platform to fill functional gaps. And so in theory, that gives you the capability to meet every need, and the benefit of having all of that capability from a single provider with a common user interface. So there are clearly benefits to that. The counter argument is you talked before about history of organizations who've put all their eggs in one basket and gone.
That's right.
If you go with everything from a single player, there may be cases where even those different options that I mentioned before may still not give you the best fit compared with what you could get from someone else. And so generally speaking, we find even clients who have gone down an ecosystem and platform path has still got multiple vendor relationships. Right. Hardly anyone is getting everything from a single.
That's right. Even though there has been a particular push around that. And it's important to say that just the Microsoft side, that's one example we're using, but SAP and Oracle are doing the same thing. And I think even a lot of vendors are now venturing into supporting, even, I know that's not a topic that we're discussing today, but they're venturing into the infrastructure and the architecture elements, so that they provide not only an applications support, but they provide also an general IT support as well. And so I think that's really important to mention about platforms. But I like what you said, really, and I know we speak about this with clients a lot, is just because something is branded as within a particular solution, a lot of added functionality inside a platform has been acquired and brought in. So you've really got to do an analysis of what is being brought in versus naturally built within the particular software. And that there is a difference between the two things, right? Because typically, if you develop something, yes, it takes longer, but it is natively integrated. I think the most important thing for organizations to understand, right, is that when you're talking about a platform, the responsibility of upgrading and updating that particular piece of software, whether it's been acquired or built into the system, sits with that platform. And I think that's one of the benefits that a lot of organizations see with that, is when you're upgrading, and especially with the rate of upgrades these days with cloud and, it's every quarter and stuff like that, the more disintegrated you are, one of the complications that comes up is that you've got to go and upgrade all of those tools, or at least you have to check. You don't have to upgrade them, they're upgraded for you, but you have to check the integration between them. So a platform gives you that added comfort that it's being handled by someone else. Certainly doesn't remove risk of it going wrong, but it mitigates that. And I guess that's one of the pros, I guess you would say, of a platform.
And there are two things in there that I'd probably pick up on. One is the platform concept as including the infrastructure as part of a service, as part of the overall migration to the cloud. And whereas previously the software selection decision would then also have all the infrastructure choices that go with it, now the leading vendors are offering it's all wrapped up in the same service. It's reducing the amount of work that you have to do.
As the amount of friction for an organization.
So that's a good part of the platform concept. And yeah, I agree with you on the getting under the covers of the pre-built integration, and is it really fully built and fully supported? What we have seen over the years is some of the bigger vendors acquiring capability and integrating it into their ecosystem, but not necessarily fully integrating the product. And organizations need to do their homework and understand, well, what am I really getting here? Yes. Has it actually been fully integrated to the rest of the solution, and will it be upgraded and supported in the same way as the rest of the core product will be? I think that is more common now that the answer is yes. There was a period of time where the answer was often no.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So Paul, thanks so much for joining me on the SMC couch today. I hope you've had fun, and I hope we've given you some insights. Hope you've enjoyed that. It certainly doesn't cover the entire topic, and we hope to meet you again in future and talk about this some more. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.